In today's lesson, we are going to take a look at converting a function from standard form into vertex form, and that involves completing the square, everybody's favorite process. So we're going to start by looking at functions that have a lead coefficient of 1, much easier to rewrite them in vertex form. So what we do, because we've got that f of x on the other side, it's not an equation, we can't just add the 13 over. We kind of isolate those two terms with a variable by just using a parenthesis. And then we're going to complete the square inside the parenthesis, and we'll figure out a way to balance the equation. And I'll show you how to do that. So we complete the square, remembering the process. We divide our b term by 2. And I should have started with a parenthesis. And then we square that 5 and add it inside the parenthesis. So I have a little asterisk here because this is the piece that's different. Typically we would add that 5 squared to both sides of the equation, but because we've got that f of x, this is a function, not an equation, we are going to balance it by subtracting it on the outside of the parentheses. So think about the fact that inside the parentheses we added 25, outside the parentheses we subtracted 25 to the same side of the equation. So essentially we added 0, so it didn't change the equation that we started with. And then we're going to go ahead and factor and simplify so that it is in vertex form. So remember, when we complete the square, we don't think when we factor. The x drops down, the negative sign drops down, the 5 drops down, and the square moves to the outside. And then outside the parentheses, we've got that negative 13 minus 25, so we simplify that as well. So now we have our function in vertex form. To identify the vertex, don't forget about the asylum, so we've got 5, negative 38 for our vertex. Let's practice this again with a lead coefficient of 1. So we isolate those two terms with a parenthesis, complete the square inside the parenthesis, cut b in half, square it and add it inside the parenthesis, and then subtract it outside to balance the equation. So we added 12 squared and then subtracted 12 squared. Factor, the x plus 12 drops down, and then outside the 145 plus negative 144 is 1. So our vertex, remembering the asylum, is negative 12, 1. Oh, that's the same page. So we're going to take a look at 2 more extra practice. If you feel like you've got it with the lead coefficient of 1, go ahead and jump to the next video where we look at the lead coefficient other than 1. So first step, isolate those 2 terms with a parenthesis. Complete the square, cutting b in half, squaring it and adding it inside the parentheses, and then subtracting it outside the parentheses. Then we're going to factor and simplify to get it in vertex form. So the x minus 7 drops down with the square on the outside. Negative 51 simplifies outside our parentheses. So our vertex is positive 7, negative 51. And one more. Separating our x terms, completing the square, cutting our b value in half, squaring it and adding it inside and subtracting it outside. Factoring, the x plus 10 drops down, negative 108 on the outside. So our vertex is negative 10, negative 108.